You know, quite a few years ago, I think it was when Bill Clinton was inaugurated, it was one of his speeches, he recognized one single individual as being very important to him philosophically. And that was a bit of surprise because I knew about the individual, and some of you may know about him, but it's worth looking into. And his name was Carroll Quigley. He wrote the book Tragedy and Hope. Now, the important part of Tragedy and Hope in Carroll Quigley is that he claims that he was on the inside and part of the group that, did the planning. But why did he write Tragedy and Hope? To expose these people behind the scenes? Because he believed they were far enough advanced. It didn't have to be secret. They could be out in the open. And this is the way it works. It's a tragedy if you don't accept this, and there's hope if you know who runs the show. That's my interpretation, but I believe it's correct. But let me read a quote from him, and thinking about where he's coming from. He says, the argument that the two parties should represent opposed ideals and policies, one perhaps the right and the other of the left, is a foolish idea, acceptable only to the doctrinaire and academic thinkers. Instead, the two parties should be almost identical, so that the American people can throw the rascals out at any election without leading to any profound or extensive shift in policy. I mean, I think that is profound statement, because it tells us what's going on and why things don't change.
Tragedy and Hope is a 1,300-page book which Ron Paul has not read. How do I know he hasn't read it? Because it is diametrically opposed to his views on monetary policy. Now, as we know, Ron Paul, he thinks that inflation is the worst thing in the world, and to get out of this recession, we need to deflate the economy, prices need to go down, we need to go to a gold standard, sound money, no government spending, all that kind of stuff, right? Well, what does Dr. Quigley have to say about deflation? Now, this is in reference to the deflationary period of the Great Depression, of course. He uses phrases like the dangerous economic implications of deflation. Deflation became more deep-rooted and economic conditions worsened. The deflationary crisis of 1927 to 1940 can hardly be overestimated, and in regards to Germany's deflation starting around 1930, Bruning's policy of deflation was a disaster. The suffering of the people was terrible, with almost 8 million unemployed. Now, of course, Austrian economists, like Ron Paul and his little buddies, they pretend that the Great Depression has a completely different history to what actually happened. See, they claim that the Great Depression was caused by inflationary policies and too much government spending and government interference, all that kind of stuff. Well, what does Carol have to say about that? The formula for treating a depression was by clinging to the gold standard, by raising interest rates and seeking deflation, and by insisting on a reduction of public spending, a fiscal surplus, or at least a balanced budget. So there you go. Ron Paul just made an ass of himself by quoting somebody who makes his beliefs look silly. So why did Ron do that? It's because he's a kook spiritard. I mean, the guy has said that the Fed is secretly funding the CIA to overthrow governments and that kind of stuff. And his fellow and favorite kook spiritards, well, they love quoting this book. See, they believe that this book proves that secret societies have been manipulating the world for, I don't know, a century or something like that, and they engineered World War I and World War II. The fact of the matter is, this book actually talks about how the powers that be, the Round Table Group and who not, they were actually trying to appease Germany to try and avoid a war. In fact, this book, it's just a regular history book, really. It uses the same basic facts that every mainstream history textbook does. Yeah, seriously. I mean, that's a whole other video. I'll do that at some other point. But trust me, it does make your beliefs look silly. Don't believe me? Go ahead and read it. I dare you to. I honestly hope you do. But anyway, now that you know that your favorite sources make you look silly, why don't you just modify your beliefs? Seriously. I mean, yeah, I know that would involve you admitting to yourself that you've been making yourself look like a fool for probably quite a few years. But I promise you, Once you do this, you can work on the problem, and then people will not look at you as a ridiculous little idiot anymore. It'll be a great leap forward for you, I promise.